Welcome to another edition of Dallas Cowboys Training Camp Two-a-days here in Oxnard, California. Bill Jones joined by John Machota of The Athletic. And what is going on right now in front of us is a walkthrough workout. It's not really a workout, it's a walkthrough, right?
Yeah, it is. They don't have pads on, no one's hitting, no helmets. Well, a couple players have helmets on, the ones that need the mics in their helmet. But yeah, it's just a jog through type thing that I would feel bad if fans were paying to watch. That's for sure.
And as you can see, there are no fans watching because fans aren't allowed in today. As you see, the first team offense against the first team defense right there. And John, we've seen two workouts basically just in helmets. Okay, they don't put on the pads until Monday. Got another one on Saturday. What's the main thing that you're looking for as you watch these practices?
I'd say the biggest thing is just any changes in the offense now that Mike McCarthy's calling plays. And up to this point, OTAs, minicamp, and what we've seen here so far, there's not anything that really stands out majorly. But then also just the receiver position. Like, you know who the core starting trio is, but like, for example, right here, Jalen Tolbert. He didn't have much of an impact last year. They need him to step up. He's looked pretty good the first two practices, but again, they're not.
See, what I was trying to remember, it seems to me like Jalen Tolbert looked pretty good the first couple of practices in his rookie year too.
So that's I don't remember that as well, but yeah, that's possible. But the thing with him is that during OTAs and minicamp, he was dealing with a little bit of a foot issue, and so he wasn't able to kind of hit the ground running like he probably wanted to, and so now he just seems more sure of himself. He admitted during OTAs that, there was a lot for him coming from college, South Alabama, to now playing in all three wide receiver positions. So there's a lot on his plate. And so he spent a lot of time in the offseason with Dak. So they're hopeful that he can maybe be that number 4 guy.
And really when you look at the wide receiver depth behind the big three, Brandon Cooks, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup, there's a really good competition that's going to be going on here for the 4th, 5th, 6th spots, depending on how many they keep at wide receiver.
And wide receiver is such a position that it's easy to watch here because you can see them make plays. You can see them if they do the wrong thing, stuff like that. A lot easier than maybe interior of the defensive line. But yeah, Jalen Tolbert, Simi Fehoko is another guy that they're looking step up. He's a bigger receiver, so he kind of fits what Noah Brown was. Noah Brown's now in Houston, so that makes sense. But there's a lot of young guys too in this. Jalen Moreno Cropper is an undrafted guy who the last 2 days he's made some of the better catches, and you
saw that number and I said, I had to look it up.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's Jalen Moreno Cropper.
Right.
Which you'll hear a lot of him in preseason.
There you go. Yeah, that for sure. And then the other thing that stands out too, especially watching the field right now, is 42, Deuce Vaughn, and just how small he is compared to everyone else out on the field.
You know what though about Deuce Vaughn? You can even tell that just the way he handles himself on the field, that he's been around professional football, you know, with his dad, of course. You know the story from the draft. His dad is scout with the Cowboys, Chris Vaughn. He was a star down in Round Rock. And then, really, when you look at the draft, he had as good or better numbers than Bijan Robinson did at Deuce at Kansas State. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they use Deuce, not only in the backfield, but lining him up outside, maybe in the slot and that sort of thing.
Right, which he just did right there. That, and then the other one, too, is that when we talked to Mike McCarthy yesterday, he said that the biggest change that will be made to the offense is their pass protection. And so you look at a Deuce Vaughn, he's so small, you're just like, is he just going to get blown up? Are guys just going to go right after him? How's he going to hold up in those situations? And so that'll be something that they'll need to be careful with how they use him. But yeah, to your point, he tore it up at Kansas State. Obviously, he was the smallest guy out there then, and it wasn't a problem. But he's a guy that I'm obviously looking forward to in the preseason. He's going to get a lot of snaps, and once you have pads on, you can tell a lot more than we can tell out here when they're not going to tackle.
But a guy at 5'5", 180, it's not a guy that you're going to really count on to protect your quarterback.
No, absolutely not.
So they have to be creative in how they use him. And, some of the stuff that Cavante Turpin might progress into doing, Deuce Vaughn can do some of that stuff too. There's almost like there's a competition there as well.
For sure.
Even though they technically play different positions. Okay, so we talk running backs, and so how do you think it's going to shake out? And with Zeke released back in March and hasn't found a team yet, they've got to find somebody they can pair with Tony Pollard.
So right here, who I actually throwing a pass to, Ronald Jones.
How about that timing right there?
That was great timing right there. He's another guy that you kind of keep an eye on because he's a little bit of a different back than the rest of them, and he's had experience.
And he's a second-round draft pick out of USC several years ago now, and at Tampa Bay and then Kansas City. And I think the interesting thing or the concerning thing about him is, okay, he's in Kansas City last year, and he didn't get a chance to play, and they had injury issues at running back. And of course, Isaiah Pacheco, the seventh-round draft pick, kind of stole the show there in Kansas City a little bit. But him being a more veteran guy, you would think that when they signed him that he might be a guy that they're looking at. But again, it's a veteran minimum deal.
And I'm glad you bring that up because let's be honest, anybody that's found the NFL right now knows that the running back position is not being very highly paid. So if we're being completely honest, if they don't have that guy out here right now, they can go and get a guy. Like, that's not going to be one of these things where you...
Can they go and get a guy named Zeke?
I think that's unlikely. I really do. I think the ship has sailed there, but there's other guys out there. There's Leonard Fournette. There's other guys out there that I keep saying this, there's too much riding on this season not to fill a hole if there's there. They got a little bit of salary cap space. They can make some moves if they need to. They did it last year. They needed a linebacker help. They got Anthony Barr. They needed defensive tackle help. They went and got Jonathan Hankins. They needed wide receiver help. They went and got T.Y. Hilton. If they can't find a back to complement Tony Pollard, they'll go get somebody.
And they're, teams are up against the salary cap this time of the year. It's going to be interesting. It sounds like Dalvin Cook may be close to signing with the Jets. We'll see. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of money Dalvin Cook gets there in that deal. And then maybe that will start a trend. And then the other thing that's going to happen is running backs are going to get hurt.
For sure.
And these guys like Fournette and Elliott that are out there, they're basically now waiting until there's a need for a team.
Yeah, and I mean, with this franchise, they've obviously spent significantly over the years at the running back position. And I mean, if I'm sitting here today predicting, I could see that their next star running back, their lead back, is a guy they draft next year in the second or third round. I mean, that's just the way that the position's going. It's not fair to those guys. It sucks if you're a running back and how the position's been devalued, but that's the way that teams are going to operate. And Dalvin Cook, I still think that there's tread on the tire, but people aren't paying for running backs, and I don't think that this team would invest on a level for like a guy like Dalvin Cook.
Right. And that's the thing with Pollard. He, even though he has, you would think, has more tread left on his tire than Zeke does at this point in his career. But when Pollard, a year from now, is going to be almost at the same position in his career that Zeke was this year. So he's 5 years into the league, and that's
for sure.
How much money is he going to get?
And it is interesting how Tony Pollard's numbers, all 4 of those years, all of them across the board have gone up. So it's about kind of seeing what can he handle too, because he's going to get more touches. But then you're also balancing do you really need Tony Pollard getting 20 touches during the regular season? You want Tony Pollard to be at his best in January. That's when this team is going to be judged by what they do in January. And you need Tony Pollard to be as healthy as possible then. So you have to balance that a little bit as well.
You mentioned Mike McCarthy calling plays off the top here. How different do you think things will look with McCarthy calling plays? And, of course, Brian Schottenheimer now the offensive coordinator.
From that standpoint, I honestly don't think it's going to look a lot different. I think the biggest difference you're going to see is probably the impact of Brandon Cooks. And just because he's the faster, smaller, shiftier, quicker receiver that this offense hasn't necessarily had recently, I think his impact on CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, I think that will be where you see the big change. Personnel changes are the ones that I think will be the bigger difference. Jake Ferguson, can he step into that number 1 tight end role with Dalton Schultz gone? Stuff like that. I mean, when we've talked to Brian Schottenheimer, the new offensive coordinator, he's talked about keeping it about 75% similar to what they've done, emphasizing that it wasn't like it was broke before under Kellen Moore. So I don't think there's going to be some sweeping major changes.
Yep. All right, kind of a look behind the scenes here. This is, for this walkthrough, it's basically become a photo deck, as you see TV cameras and newspaper photographers as well along here, and reporters as they watch the watch the walkthrough out there. And do you pick up much yourself as you watch a walkthrough?
For me, I'd say number 1 thing is attendance, just what guys aren't here. There in the middle of the field, Trayvon Diggs is working on the resistance cords. He pulled himself out of practice a couple days ago. I guess it's a toe issue, but it's nothing significant. But things like that, where you come out here and then all of a sudden you're just like, well, where's so-and-so? Where's this guy at? Why is this guy working off to the side? And that will help you ask some questions, get to the bottom of things. And then when this practice started, there were some personnel changes that were going on, and they weren't happening very quickly. And it's interesting always see like Mike McCarthy yelling at some guys, kind of like, let's get this going, and because he's looking to try and set the tempo for later on. But that stuff more than, for example, like Micah Parsons busting through right now. They don't have pads on. You kind of expect Micah to do that. So it's more of that stuff.
But you can kind of get a feel for maybe the aptitude of some play. If you watch enough practices, enough time, I've always looked at it this way too. I mean, John studies the draft for the Athletic so much, and all of us now dive into the draft and we learn about these players and what they did in college and the athleticism. What we don't know is a lot of times is what they're really like,
For sure.
which means as far as them being able to pick up an offense or a defense, and the way they engage with teammates and so forth. And that's some of the stuff that you can pick up on just being out here and watching all the practices.
Yeah, for sure. And the more that you can stack together, the more you can kind of see rotations and things like that. For example, one thing that I've noticed these past 3 days is that with Zach Martin not being here, at right guard, it's been Josh Ball the entire time. And if you would have told me a week ago Zach Martin's not going to be here, who's going to be at right guard, I would have told you, it'll be 2 or 3 different guys, Chuma Doga, Matt Farniak, and every time that they've run the ones, Josh Ball has been the right guard. And I just think stuff like that says a little bit about what they're seeing behind the scenes from a guy and what they can maybe count on from him this year.
And Doga is a guy that you would thought, okay, with Connor McGovern leaving at left guard, depending on what they did at the tackle, and if Terrence Steele was ready, that would Tyron be on the right side at tackle, and then Tyler Smith at left tackle. Well, Tyler Smith's playing left guard, and he's been told that he basically, the way it stands right now, that's where he's going to stay.
Yeah, for sure.
For now.
For sure, which is funny because he told us yesterday, he was like, so when did you find out that it was going to be left guard? Like back, a couple months ago. He's like, kind of when I showed up here. And it was like, but he continues to say that he's been cross training at both positions. And I will say that, we talk about the draft. Tyler Smith, they got a steal on him. I mean, just like everything about him, the size, the maturity, the way he carries himself, how,
he can handle the whole.
Yeah, like there's a lot of guys
stage.
that it wouldn't be as open to making some of the changes he's had to make on the fly. And I just think they really got a good one there. Obviously, this team has shown
he's
that they
been
know
brought up well in Crowley, at North
sure.
Crowley High
there you
School,
go. Yeah.
and his mom and so forth. All right, and we'll be back all through next week, 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock here on CBSTexas.com.